The dirt was still falling on my wife's coffin when my son demanded $55 million. Not a day later. Not an hour. Right there, beside the woman who had given him life, he looked at me with diamond-polished eyes, his Rolex flashing like arrogance incarnate, and said, "I want my inheritance. Now." I smiled. Because I had been waiting for that moment, the day my son would prove, beyond doubt, who he truly was. He thought he was asking for money. He was actually asking for judgment. If you've ever been betrayed by blood, if love once blinded you to what someone really was, stay until the end. Because this isn't just a story about revenge. It's a story about the silence before the reckoning. Grief doesn't always come when someone dies. Sometimes, it starts long before the funeral. Sometimes, it begins the day you realize the person you love most is already gone, just walking around in someone else's body. That realization came years before my wife's coffin touched the earth. It began quietly, like a crack in glass. My son, Ethan, had once been the kind of boy who used to run through the house laughing, barefoot, with his mother's scarf tied around his shoulders like a cape. His laughter filled every corner of our home. He had her smile, her curiosity, and for a while, I thought, maybe that was enough to keep the light alive in him. But somewhere between the first taste of success and the first lie he told without guilt, something shifted. It started small. Missed calls. Excuses for not visiting. The way he rolled his eyes when his mother asked about his life. He used to say he was too busy building something real, as if the family that had built him was just a distraction. The first time his mother's illness was mentioned, he called it an overreaction. I still remember the day she told him about her diagnosis, her voice trembling as she tried to soften it for him. "It's stage 2, she said. "The doctors think we caught it early." He didn't even look up from his phone. "You'll be fine, Mom. They treat that kind of stuff all the time." Then he excused himself for a meeting. He didn't come back for 6 months. In those 6 months, she lost her hair. Her weight dropped. Her laugh, once bright as sunlight through kitchen windows, became something quiet, fragile, borrowed. Every day, I told her he'd come. That he just needed time. That success made people forget their roots for a while, but he'd remember. He didn't. She died waiting for him to. I called him the night before she passed. "Ethan," I said softly, "your mother's asking for you. You should come." There was a pause, then the sound of laughter, not his, but the people around him. "Dad, I'm in Dubai," he said. "It's complicated right now. I've got investors here. Can you just tell her I'll call tomorrow?" "She may not have a tomorrow," I said. He sighed, annoyed, as if grief were an inconvenience. "You're being dramatic. She's always pulling through, right? She's strong." He didn't understand that strength has limits. The next morning, she was gone. When I told him, there was silence on the line. No gasp. No apology. Just a flat, mechanical okay. I didn't hear from him again for nearly 2 years. In that time, I buried her. I built her a memorial garden behind the house. I found her favorite photos, her favorite records, her handwritten recipes, all tucked away in drawers she thought I'd never open. And in that silence, something inside me hardened. Not hatred, never that. Hatred is too loud, too consuming. What grew in me was colder. Still. Like a frozen lake waiting for the first crack of spring. I thought I'd raised a son. But what I'd really raised was an heir, someone who learned to measure love by inheritance, not by sacrifice. My wife's family had money, old money, the kind that carries weight even when the people who earned it are long gone. I'd spent 30 years growing it, expanding it, protecting it. $55 million spread across investments, properties, and trusts. Ethan knew it existed. He just didn't know what it cost. He once said, when he was 17, "Dad, when you die, I'll finally be able to do what I want." I remember laughing then, thinking it was teenage rebellion. But looking back, I realize it wasn't a joke. It was a prophecy. I kept tabs on him, quietly, through people who still remembered what he used to be. I saw the photos online, the luxury penthouses, the champagne, the women, the hollow smiles. I saw the interviews, too, where he talked about self-made success. I'd built that success. Every door he walked through was opened by my reputation, by the weight of a name I'd spent a lifetime keeping clean. And still, I didn't reach out. I waited. Because life has a cruel way of bringing arrogance home. And it did, the day of his mother's funeral. He arrived late, of course. The black car pulled up long after the first prayer had been said. The door opened, and he stepped out wearing a tailored suit worth more than most people's yearly salary. His hair slicked back, his cufflinks gleaming. No grief. No humility. Just performance. He shook a few hands, smiled for a few photos, yes, photos, and walked toward me as though approaching a business associate. "Dad," he said, offering a handshake. I stared at it. "That's what you give me today? A handshake?" He smiled faintly, eyes flicking toward the crowd. "We're in public." I ignored his hand. "Your mother waited for you, you know. Every night." He sighed, looking bored. "Dad, please. Don't make this dramatic. I couldn't drop everything for every crisis." "Every crisis," I repeated softly. "You call her dying a crisis?" "Fine," he snapped. "Tragedy. Whatever makes you feel better." I wanted to hit him then. God help me, I did. But grief is heavier than anger. It keeps your hands still even when your heart begs for movement. Instead, I walked past him and stood by her coffin. My fingers rested on the wood. For a moment, I felt her there, the warmth, the gentleness, the patience that I'd never have again. And then, in that sacred quiet, my son spoke again. "Dad," he said, lowering his voice. "We should talk about the estate." I turned slowly. "The what?" "The inheritance," he said. "Mom's gone now. That means the trust transfers, right?" He said it as casually as someone asking for directions. I stared at him, the words sinking into the air between us like poison. "You're asking me for money? At your mother's funeral?" He shrugged. "She'd have wanted me taken care of." "No," I said. "She wanted you to care." He scoffed. "Don't be dramatic, Dad. I just want what's mine." "What's yours?" I whispered. "You've never earned a day of it." His eyes hardened. "That's not how inheritance works." I smiled. A slow, tired smile. "You're right. It's not." He frowned. "Then we're on the same page." "Yes," I said quietly. "We are." Because in that moment, as the priest's final prayer faded and the crowd began to disperse, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't fight. I would give him what he'd asked for, just not in the way he imagined. He wanted his inheritance. So I would give him the lesson it was built on. And when it was done, he would finally understand what $55 million was really worth, not in money, but in the cost of forgetting the hands that gave it to you. That night, after everyone had gone and the cemetery fell silent, I stood by her grave and made my vow. "Don't worry," I whispered. "He'll learn. I promise you, he'll learn." And when I turned to leave, the wind picked up, soft, cold, almost approving. Like she'd heard me. Like she was waiting for the day justice would walk quietly in her name. The morning after her funeral, I woke to silence, the kind that presses against your ribs and dares you to breathe. Grief has a sound when it's fresh, it's heavy, wet, like footsteps in a flooded hallway. The air felt thick with things unsaid. Her clothes still hung in the closet, her scent faint in the folds of fabric. Every corner of the house carried her ghost. I made coffee out of habit, 2 cups, then remembered there was no one to hand the second one to. I stared at the steam rising from it until it faded, disappearing the way she had, quietly, without fanfare. It was 8:14 when the doorbell rang. I didn't need to check who it was. There was only one person arrogant enough to show up unannounced the morning after we buried her. When I opened the door, Ethan stood there. Sunglasses, expensive cologne, suit pressed like he was going to a meeting instead of his mother's home. He held a folder in one hand and a coffee from some luxury cafe in the other. "Morning, Dad," he said, as if it were any other day. I didn't move. "You shouldn't be here." He smiled faintly. "I wanted to talk." "About your mother?" He hesitated, just long enough for the truth to show. About the estate. I closed my eyes. Of course. He walked past me like he owned the place, dropping his coffee on the counter, flipping open his folder. I've been reviewing some things with my lawyer. Mom's share of the estate should have transferred to me. That's what the will said, right? I stared at him, not in anger, but disbelief. You're really doing this now? Dad, grief doesn't stop the world from moving, he said, flipping through documents like an accountant balancing a ledger. You always told me to be practical. Practical? I repeated softly. She's been gone 2 days. And I'm not trying to be insensitive, but this is important. I laughed, a dry, broken sound. Important, I said. You weren't here when she asked for you. You weren't here when she forgot her own name. You weren't here when she begged me not to tell you how much it hurt. He bristled. I was working. I have responsibilities. You had a mother, I said. And you traded her for meetings and flights. He slammed his hand on the table. Stop trying to guilt me. You think I don't feel bad? No, I said quietly. I think you don't feel anything at all. He looked away, jaw tight. This isn't fair. You've always judged me. I've never judged you, I said. I just watched you become everything your mother prayed you wouldn't. That stung him. I saw it, the flicker of something human, the crack in the mask. But it vanished as quickly as it came. He took a breath. Look, I don't want to fight. Just give me what's mine and we can both move on. What's yours? I repeated. You keep saying that. Tell me, Ethan, what part of $55 million do you think you've earned? I'm your son. That's not an achievement. He clenched his fists. You think I don't deserve it because I didn't struggle like you did? No, I said. I think you don't deserve it because you stopped loving the people who made sure you never had to. He scoffed, pacing. You're unbelievable. You think money's about morality. It's not. It's about power, legacy, survival. Your mother survived without wealth, I said. And she was stronger than you'll ever be. Then let her legacy survive through me, he snapped. I smiled. You already killed her legacy when you turned your back on it. That silence that followed was sharp enough to bleed. Then he said the words that sealed his fate. Dad, if you don't transfer my inheritance by next week, I'll get the courts involved. I stared at him. You'd take your own father to court? He shrugged. It's not personal. It's business. I stepped closer, the kind of calm that only comes when anger burns itself clean. Then let me make this personal for you, I said. If you file that case, I'll make sure you regret it. He laughed, short and dismissive. What are you going to do, disinherit me? I didn't answer. He took my silence as weakness. You wouldn't. You're too sentimental. That's always been your flaw. He gathered his papers, turned to leave, and said over his shoulder, You'll come around. You always do. And then he was gone. The house felt smaller after he left, like it was holding its breath. I sat in the chair by the window, the same chair where my wife used to read, and watched the sun crawl up the walls. I thought of her last words, whispered in the half-light of a hospital room. Don't let him destroy you. At the time, I thought she meant emotionally. Now, I realized she'd meant something else. Don't let him destroy what you built. I poured myself a drink I didn't even want and walked to the study. The computer hummed to life. If Ethan wanted a war over inheritance, he would get one. But it wouldn't be the kind fought with lawyers or signatures. It would be one fought with truth, a kind of justice no courtroom could reverse. I opened my wife's trust documents, the financial ledgers, the charities she'd supported in her final years. I spent the entire night reading, remembering, rebuilding the plan she and I once dreamed of, a foundation in her name, dedicated to cancer treatment for families who couldn't afford it. We'd put it on hold when her health declined. But she'd never stopped believing it would happen someday. Maybe that someday was now. By morning, I'd made my decision. Every cent, every stock, every property, every bond, would go into that foundation. Nothing to Ethan. Not a dime. I called my lawyer, a man I'd known for 30 years. "Draw up the papers," I said. "Transfer everything." He hesitated. "All of it? All of it?" He sighed. "You realize what this means. He'll come after you. He already has. You'll make an enemy out of your own son." I looked out the window, at the sunlight filtering through her garden. He stopped being my son the day he put a price on her grave. The lawyer said nothing after that. Just a quiet, "I'll handle it." When I hung up, the weight on my chest lifted. Not joy, not satisfaction, just clarity. For years, I had believed forgiveness was strength. I'd forgiven his arrogance, his cruelty, his absence. But forgiveness isn't strength when it enables rot. Sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is stop saving the people who enjoy watching him drown. A week later, a courier arrived with an envelope from Ethan's lawyer. A lawsuit. Petition for release of estate assets. I smiled. It was beginning. He wanted a battle. He would get one, but it wouldn't be fought in the way he expected. I'd built empires from dust before. This time, I'd build justice from ashes. He thought money was power. But he was about to learn that legacy, when forged by love, not greed, is unbreakable. And by the time I was done, Ethan wouldn't just lose his inheritance. He would lose the illusion that he'd ever been rich to begin with. The night after the lawsuit arrived, the house was dark except for the soft hum of the old desk lamp in my study. Outside, rain fell in steady sheets, tapping against the windows like an impatient ghost. I sat alone, surrounded by ledgers, trust papers, bank statements, and memories that refused to die. A week later, a courier arrived with an envelope from Ethan's lawyer. A lawsuit. Petition for release of estate assets. I smiled. It was beginning. He wanted a battle. He would get one, but it wouldn't be fought in the way he expected. I'd built empires from dust before. This time, I'd build justice from ashes. He thought money was power. But he was about to learn that legacy, when forged by love, not greed, is unbreakable. And by the time I was done, Ethan wouldn't just lose his inheritance. He would lose the illusion that he'd ever been rich to begin with. The night after the lawsuit arrived, the house was dark except for the soft hum of the old desk lamp in my study. Outside, rain fell in steady sheets, tapping against the windows like an impatient ghost. I sat alone, surrounded by ledgers, trust papers, bank statements, and memories that refused to die. Ethan's lawyer had given me 10 days to comply. 10 days to hand him everything his mother and I had spent a lifetime building. 10 days to bow to the greed of my own blood. But I had no intention of complying. I had 10 days to do something much better. For 30 years, I'd built wealth the slow way, through quiet patience, smart investments, and an instinct for timing. I'd watched men destroy themselves chasing fast money, the kind that burns as quickly as it shines. I never wanted Ethan to be one of them. But I'd raised him in comfort, given him everything too easily, and in doing so, I'd built a prince who believed the kingdom was his birthright. Now, I'd show him what a king does when his heir turns into a thief. I started with her, with my wife. Every plan I made began and ended with her memory. I pulled open the drawer where I'd kept her old letters. The last one she'd ever written to me was dated 2 months before she passed. "Promise me," she had written, "that you won't let him take what was meant to help others. Money dies in the wrong hands. Let it breathe in the right ones." So I promised her again, out loud this time, the rain drowning my voice. I won't let him touch it. The next morning, I called my attorney. "We're moving everything into the foundation. Not in a week. Not in a month. Now." He hesitated. "You're aware, once you transfer these assets, you can't undo it." "That's the point. Your son will contest it." "He can try." By noon, I was in my lawyer's downtown office, watching as he drew up the paperwork. The foundation would bear her name, the Margaret Hale Cancer Initiative. A name that meant compassion to the world, and guilt to the son who had ignored her dying call. Every signature I penned felt like a small exorcism. I was freeing her memory from the clutches of greed. The mansion, the cars, the accounts, all of it would now fund treatment centers, research programs, and family grants. It took 3 days. 3 sleepless, methodical days. When it was done, I had nothing left in my own name but the house and an old sedan. $55 million, gone from my hands, but preserved in something incorruptible. The morning after the transfer cleared, I received a call from my lawyer. "It's done," he said. "He can't touch a cent." I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, and felt the first true peace I'd known since the day she died. Of course, peace never lasts long when someone like Ethan feels cornered. He called that afternoon. "Dad, what the hell did you do?" His voice was raw, shaking, stripped of its usual arrogance. "Good afternoon, son," I said evenly. "Don't son me. I just got word from my lawyer. You moved everything into a charity? You think you can screw me out of what's mine with some moral stunt? What's yours?" I repeated softly. That word again. "This is insane," he spat. "Mom would never have wanted this." I smiled faintly. "Your mother's name is on the foundation, Ethan." That shut him up. For a moment, all I heard was breathing on the other end of the line, heavy, furious. "You think you're clever," he said finally. "You think you can just humiliate me like this?" "Humiliation requires an audience," I said. "Right now, it's just us." He laughed bitterly. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching me squirm?" "No," I said. "I'm watching you learn." He hung up. That night, I sat by the fire with a glass of bourbon, the documents for the foundation neatly stacked beside me. My lawyer had told me I could hold a public gala to announce it, invite investors, donors, the media. At first, I dismissed the idea. It felt too performative, too loud. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something. Ethan had always loved audiences. He thrived on validation, on public admiration. Maybe it was time he met that same audience again, but this time, stripped of his mask. I called my lawyer back the next morning. "We're hosting the gala," I said. "Make it grand. Make it impossible to ignore." Within weeks, invitations went out to everyone who'd ever mattered in our world. Business partners, politicians, philanthropists, the same people Ethan used to brag about knowing. And, of course, I made sure one invitation went directly to him. He wouldn't be able to resist. Pride wouldn't let him. The night of the gala arrived beneath a silver sky. The venue glowed with chandeliers and polished marble floors. The air buzzed with champagne bubbles and polite laughter, the sound of people pretending to care while measuring each other's worth in diamonds and deals. I arrived early, shaking hands, offering smiles that didn't reach my eyes. Every detail was deliberate, the banners bearing her name, the photos of her smiling with patience, the displays of hospital wings funded by her memory. Everywhere Ethan looked that night, he would see his mother, not as the woman he ignored, but as the legacy he would never own. When he arrived, the room seemed to shift. He came alone this time, no entourage, no flash. Just the same sharp suit, the same expensive watch. His confidence flickered when he saw me standing at the podium. "Dad," he said softly as he approached. "You really went through with this." "Yes," I said. "And tonight, you'll understand why." He frowned. "You didn't have to make it public." I met his gaze. "No. But you did, the moment you made greed your language." The music faded. The lights dimmed. I stepped up to the microphone, the room falling into expectant silence. "Thank you for coming," I began. "Tonight, we honor a woman who gave everything she had, even when she had nothing left." The crowd murmured softly, respectful. Ethan looked uneasy, shifting in his seat. "My wife," I continued, "believed that wealth is a tool, not a trophy. She once said, 'Money dies in the wrong hands.' Tonight, I make good on her words." I gestured to the large projection screen behind me. Numbers appeared, account transfers, property deeds, trusts, all labeled under the Margaret Hale Cancer Initiative. "This," I said, "is every cent she and I ever built. From this day forward, it belongs to the people who need it most. Not to heirs. Not to shareholders. To humanity." Applause rippled through the room. But amid the clapping, I could feel Ethan's eyes burning into me. Then, quietly, I added, And to those who ask why I gave it all away, the answer is simple. Because some inheritances destroy more than they build. The room fell silent again. All eyes turned toward Ethan. He shifted in his seat, his jaw tight. I built this foundation, I said, not out of anger, but out of love, for the woman who deserved more, and the son who chose less. A murmur ran through the guests, polite, confused, but unmistakably curious. Ethan stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. You think you're teaching me a lesson, he shouted. You're just proving you're weak. The crowd gasped. Cameras flashed. I looked at him, calm, unflinching. Weakness isn't giving away what you can't take with you. Weakness is asking for it before the ground over your mother's grave has settled. He froze. The words hit him like a blow. I turned back to the microphone. Let's continue the evening. There's still much good to be done. The applause began again, hesitant at first, then thunderous. When I looked back, Ethan was gone. Later, I found his glass of untouched champagne still sitting on the edge of the table, the bubbles gone flat. I stared at it for a long time. Revenge, I realized, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it stands in a room full of people and lets truth do the speaking. That night, I went home alone, the applause still faint in my ears. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel heavy. It felt free. But the story wasn't over yet. Ethan wasn't done fighting. And I wasn't done teaching. The night after the gala, silence followed me home like a shadow. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence before an aftershock, that calm stretch of air that holds its breath before something else breaks. Ethan hadn't called. Not that night. Not the next morning. But I knew him too well. Pride like his doesn't fade, it festers. He was quiet because he was calculating. Because he thought there was still a way to win. I poured myself a drink and waited. By the second night, the call came. Dad, he said, his voice low and trembling, what you did was public humiliation. No, I said. What you did was private betrayal. I simply brought light to it. You've destroyed my reputation. I only revealed what you built it on. He was silent for a moment, then his tone shifted, not angry now, but almost pleading. We can fix this. You can transfer part of the funds back, maybe say it was temporary, an emotional decision after Mom's death. People will understand. I smiled bitterly. You still think this is about money? Of course it is, he shouted. You think giving it all to charity makes you righteous? It makes you stupid. Do you know how many people are laughing at you right now? Let them laugh, I said softly. They'll stop when the work begins. He sighed heavily. You really don't get it. You've killed our family name. You've killed me. No, I said. You did that when you stopped being her son. The line went dead. For a few weeks, there was quiet. The foundation flourished, donations poured in, hospitals reached out, research teams called. Her name, Margaret Hale, shone brighter than it ever had when she was alive. The world began to remember her not as the socialite's wife or the woman who threw charity luncheons, but as the soul behind a movement. But Ethan, he was unraveling. News travels fast in our world, and faster still when it smells of scandal. The son of a multimillionaire disinherited at his mother's memorial gala, it was too rich for gossip to ignore. Articles appeared. Fallen heir. A father's revenge. When blood turns to ice. At first, he tried to fight it. His PR team spun stories, he was blindsided, his challenging the legality, the father is unstable from grief. But the internet doesn't forgive. And truth, when planted deep enough, doesn't rot. It roots. Within months, his investors pulled out. Business partners cut ties. The luxury brand he'd started, a tech lifestyle company built on image, lost value overnight. By the end of the fiscal year, it was bankrupt. He had burned through everything he had earned. Still, he didn't stop. He filed another lawsuit, this time to challenge the legality of the foundation transfer. His lawyers argued emotional duress, mental incompetence, manipulative grieving. I attended every hearing. Never spoke. Never looked at him. Just sat there, silent, as my lawyer dismantled his case piece by piece. In one of the final sessions, Ethan tried to speak directly to me. "Dad," he said in front of the judge, his voice cracking, "you're destroying your own son." I finally looked at him, really looked at him. The tailored suit, the tired eyes, the desperation disguised as outrage. "No," I said evenly. "I'm saving the world from the man you became." The courtroom fell quiet. The judge dismissed the case. That day, Ethan walked past me without a glance. But as he brushed by, I caught the faint scent of the cologne his mother had once bought him for Christmas. A scent that now smelled more like decay than memory. Months later, I held another event for the foundation, smaller, more focused this time. A dinner for donors and researchers. I gave a short speech about progress, about the new treatment center opening under her name. The applause was warm, genuine. But as I left the stage, my lawyer approached, whispering, "He's here." I turned. And there he was. Ethan stood at the edge of the crowd, thinner now, shadows under his eyes. His arrogance was gone, replaced by something I hadn't seen in years, fear. I nodded to security to let him through. He walked toward me slowly, his steps heavy. "Dad," he said quietly. "Ethan. I just wanted to talk." "You've had months to talk." He exhaled shakily. "I know. I wanted to see it. What you built." I gestured to the photographs around the room. Smiling patients, doctors in lab coats, construction of new hospital wings. "This is your mother's legacy." He nodded, eyes glistening. "She'd be proud." "She would," I said. "But not of what came before." He swallowed. "I know. I messed up. I cut him off gently. "You didn't mess up, Ethan. Messing up is forgetting an anniversary, missing a phone call. You abandoned her. You abandoned both of us." He closed his eyes. I thought I'd have time to fix it. I looked at him for a long moment. "So did she." He said nothing. Just stood there, motionless, as the sound of quiet chatter filled the room. Finally, he whispered, "Can I help? With the foundation, I mean. Maybe I can." "No," I said, not cruelly, but firmly. "This is sacred ground. You don't get to walk here anymore." His lips trembled. "I'm still your son." "By blood," I said. "Not by behavior." He nodded slowly, tears welling. "I understand." He turned to leave, then paused. "You know, for a long time, I thought you were weak. But you're not. You're just colder than I realized." I sighed. "No, son. I'm just finished pretending love means letting you hurt me." He nodded once, the smallest gesture of defeat, and walked out. That was the last time I saw him in person. In the months that followed, the world forgot his name but remembered hers. The Margaret Hale Cancer Initiative expanded internationally. Grants funded treatment centers in 6 countries. Every time I saw another patient saved, another family given hope, I felt her closer, not as a ghost, but as presence. Sometimes I'd catch myself speaking to her portrait in the study. "He came tonight," I'd say softly. "He's breaking, but maybe that's what it takes to become human again." The portrait never answered, of course. But the light in her painted eyes seemed to soften when I said it. 1 year later, I received a letter. No return address. Inside was a single page. "Dad, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to know I'm trying. I sold the last of what I owned. I'm volunteering at a hospice in Arizona. I thought I'd hate it, but I don't. The patients, they remind me of Mom. The way they laugh even when it hurts. Maybe this is what she wanted for me. To understand the kind of pain I ignored. If you can, someday, come see me. Or don't. I understand if silence is your answer. Your son, Ethan." I sat in my study for a long time, staring at that letter. For years, revenge had been my comfort, the cold fire that kept me from collapsing. But reading that note, something in me shifted. Revenge had ended long ago. What remained now was consequence, and somewhere in the middle of that, maybe redemption. I didn't reply. Some messages don't need answers. They just need to be heard. The following month, I visited one of the new centers, a children's oncology wing bearing her name. The walls were painted with bright colors. Laughter echoed down the hallways. And in that sound, I finally heard what peace truly was. One of the nurses recognized me and smiled. "Mr. Hale, thank you for all this. You have no idea how many lives you've changed." I smiled faintly. "No," I said. "I think I do." That night, I returned home and sat on the porch, staring up at the stars. The wind carried the faint scent of her favorite roses from the garden. I thought of my son, broken, rebuilding, finally learning what love looks like when it isn't bought. Maybe someday I'd see him again. Maybe not. But I no longer needed revenge to define me. I had built something greater, a legacy that healed instead of hurt. Because in the end, revenge is temporary. But truth, when born from love, outlives both the guilty and the innocent. The house is quiet now. Not the kind of quiet that suffocates, the kind that breathes. Every corner feels lighter, the ghosts of old arguments and broken promises replaced by the soft hum of something gentler. Peace, maybe. Or acceptance. It's been 2 years since the night of the gala. 2 years since I watched my son fall from grace and, slowly, painfully, begin to crawl his way toward something resembling humility. The newspapers no longer talk about him. The gossip sites have moved on. The world has forgotten his name. But I haven't. Every morning, I walk through the garden she planted, the same one she used to tend before illness took her strength. The roses bloom brighter now, almost as if the soil remembers her hands. The foundation sends me reports every month. New centers opening, grants approved, lives saved. I read them all in silence. They don't feel like numbers, they feel like confessions answered. Sometimes I catch myself talking to her photograph in the kitchen. "He's learning," I tell her. The hard way, but he's learning. The silence that follows doesn't hurt anymore. It comforts. It was early autumn when the letter came. Handwritten, in ink that had smudged just slightly, like someone's trembling hand had brushed the paper before it dried. No return address. But I recognized the handwriting immediately. "Dad, I don't know how to begin this, so I'll just say what matters. I'm still in Arizona. I work at the hospice 6 days a week. It's hard, harder than I imagined, but for once in my life, I don't hate the struggle. It's strange. Watching people fight for time changes how you see your own. Sometimes I catch myself wishing Mom could see me now, though I know she'd say it's too little, too late. She'd be right. I've learned something about pain. You can't outrun it. You can only kneel beside it and listen. I think that's what love is, listening when it hurts. I didn't do that for her. Or you. There's a patient here who reminds me of you. Quiet. Stern. But every time he talks about his son, he cries. I used to think men like that were weak. Now I know they're the strongest ones of all. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm not the same man who stood over Mom's coffin asking for money. I burned that version of myself. Maybe I had to lose everything to become someone worth saving. Your son. Ethan. I read that letter 3 times, each slower than the last. The words didn't sting. They healed. It wasn't apology or redemption. It was something simpler, understanding. I placed the letter on her old writing desk, beside her favorite vase, and whispered, "He found his way." A few weeks later, I traveled to Arizona. No announcement, no call ahead. I needed to see it for myself, not to forgive, not to punish, but to know. The hospice sat at the edge of a small town, framed by orange deserts and the endless whisper of wind. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and lavender. Soft music played somewhere distant. A nurse led me through the hallways, her voice low. "Mr. Hale, he's been here almost 2 years. Never missed a shift. The patients adore him." We stopped at the end of a hallway where sunlight poured through a window. There he was, kneeling beside an old man's bed, holding his hand as the man spoke slowly, every breath an effort. Ethan didn't see me at first. He just nodded, listening, eyes soft, face thinner but peaceful. There was no arrogance left in him. No trace of the man who once measured his worth in applause. When he finally looked up and saw me standing there, he froze. The old man smiled faintly and patted his hand. Go on, son, he whispered. Family's waiting. Ethan stood. His lips parted like he wanted to speak, but no sound came out. Hello, Ethan, I said quietly. Dad, he breathed. You came. I nodded. I had to see. He swallowed hard. I didn't think you'd ever want to. Neither did I. We stood there, a few feet apart, years of distance pressing between us. The nurse passed by softly, giving us the kind of respectful space that grief demands. You look different, I said finally. He smiled faintly. So do you. Happier. I am, I admitted. Your mother would be, too. His eyes filled with tears. I talk to her sometimes. When I'm here. When I'm cleaning the rooms or helping them eat. I tell her I'm sorry. I know, I said. She hears you. He exhaled shakily, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us wasn't sharp anymore. It was soft. Like rain after years of drought. Dad, he whispered, can I come home someday? I looked at him, really looked. The pride was gone. The greed, the anger, the bitterness, all stripped away. What stood before me wasn't a broken man. It was a rebuilt one. Not today, I said. But someday, yes. He nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. That's enough. I put my hand on his shoulder, the same shoulder I'd once held when teaching him how to tie his shoes, how to drive, how to shake a man's hand. It felt lighter now, steadier. I'm proud of you, I said softly. He broke then, the kind of quiet sob that carries years of guilt and relief all tangled together. I didn't move. I just stood there, letting him fall apart the way I once did. When he finally composed himself, I said, your mother would have liked this place. He smiled through the tears. Yeah, she would have run it better than anyone. We both laughed, the first real laugh we'd shared in more than a decade. I stayed for a while, talking with patience, walking through the halls, watching him work. When I left that evening, the sunset turned the sky blood orange, the kind of color that looks like forgiveness if you stare long enough. Before I got in the car, he called out behind me. Dad! I turned. Thank you. For not giving up on me. I smiled faintly. I did give up. You just didn't. He nodded, wiping his eyes. Goodbye. For now, I said. Months have passed since that day. I still get letters, updates about the hospice, small stories about patients he's helped, lives he's touched. He never asks for money. He never talks about inheritance. Just gratitude. Just life. Sometimes, when I walk through her garden at dusk, I can almost feel them both there, her laughter in the wind, his new voice echoing from somewhere far away. The revenge I once planned so carefully seems meaningless now. Because revenge wasn't the real ending. Change was. I learned that justice doesn't always roar with fury. Sometimes it whispers through time, reshaping hearts, rewriting legacies, repairing what grief once shattered. And now, every time the sun sets across the garden, the light spilling through her roses, I hear it, faint but clear, her voice, carried by the wind. You did the right thing. I close my eyes and whisper back, so did he. And that's how it ends. Not with ruin. Not with triumph. But with silence, the kind that forgives, the kind that heals.